Welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I am Zach, and up next, five-time Olympic trials marathoner Dot McMahan discusses priorities and success over time, and after that, World of Running updates about a new U.S. record on the roads and Diamond League excitement. Welcome back. If you missed it last week, we solved all your problems and answered all your questions because it was our end of month Q&A episode. And so now you need to share more questions and more problems so we can solve them all again at the end of this month. Go to AtoZrunning.com/question to ask away. And as always, comment on all the places because we might also just give a nod to some of your thoughts and ideas right here every week.
Speaking of nodding, I'm nodding at Summer because last week she was the one who asked the question about the social running, if you remember that question. And she followed up about her long run this past weekend. And I'm going to read just part of her reflection that she posted on social media, which thank you for sharing all of this. I think it's really cool to get a deep dive into how training is for you and then your reactions to these new ideas. She said, during the run, I began to question if it's worth it, the trade-off. What am I sacrificing? I decided it wasn't an answer for one run. There was room for compromise and some alignment somewhere in the week. I'd figure it out. But today, I would go alone. So I settled in.
Those are very complex thoughts for midway through a long run.
When
Well, actually, not beginning stages, rather, of a long run.
When I got to the water drop at halfway point, I found two of my people waiting for me. They must have waited at least 10 minutes. I wanted to hug them, but I didn't because, sweat and stink. They didn't deserve that from me. We finished together. They were happy for the easier effort, and we were all happy for the company. Win-win. I'm learning my running goals and social running goals don't always play well together. This has been the biggest unexpected adjustment, but I've got good people around me, and we'll make it work when we can.
Well, thanks for sharing the thoughts, Summer, and giving us kind of a glimpse into the struggle. As we've often discussed about this particular issue, it is definitely not a straightforward thing all the time. And so kind of figuring out how to weave our way through that is always going to be challenging.
Yeah.
And so we can appreciate in a moment like that though you made what felt like a difficult decision early on, it proved to be a net positive experience for you and your people. That may not always be the case every single time, but little secret, you definitely did the right thing. And they discovered that fact at some point.
That's awesome. But, it is one of those things, and I do want to follow up on last week's conversation about social running because there's been times that I've done it properly and there's been times I've done it improperly, and there will be times where it's more important to run with a friend than it is to get the prescribed training, but then it's adjusting and knowing your training well enough or having the dialogue with your coach to know how to adjust later in the week for that. So if I go too hard with a friend on what was supposed to be an easy run and I have studies scheduled for the next day, I might have to run easy because otherwise I'm going to be not getting the adaptations I need, or I'm going to be then accumulating fatigue that I don't want to be. There's some amount of that in marathon running, but yeah, you got to know your training. You got to know what the purposes are and then what you're supposed to be doing for the remaining part of the week.
Or you can solve the problem like me and just never run with other humans ever.
I don't suggest that.
Solved. All right. Well, thank you.
He does sometimes. In fact, he did his long run with a friend this weekend, so don't let him fool you. He does indeed have running friends.
He's a rare and uncommon situation. All right. So I have one other thought to share before we get things started because this is fascinating. I receive, Andy's shaking her head at me. She's like, I don't want you to say this. Well, Andy, sometimes things that are true are not always positive. But here's the point. I subscribe to a mailing list of this researcher. He's like a psychologist who focuses specifically on the science of learning. And so most of his literature is oriented around like college students and teachers. But as it were, he has a lot of really interesting things that he shares. And specifically, he has very interesting studies that he references that kind of point to some of these conclusions. Well, one of the things that he has written about at length in different instances is the importance of addressing the concept of the power of positive thinking. And he is not the only. By the way, if you start reading about this topic more at length, you'll find that a lot of people, especially in the last several years, have been writing about how we should be addressing that concept. Because it's been the case that somewhere along the lines recently, the idea became somewhat ubiquitous that positive thought produces better outcomes. However, when studied closely, positive thought by itself produces the exact opposite of the desired outcomes most of the time. But positive thought with other things in deliberation can be very powerful. And so that's where when you start reading about like positive thinking in general, it's like positive thinking is good if you're doing certain other things with it. Well, here's what was fascinating. Peter Hollins was saying, as it were, positive thinking for a performance mindset can be a very dangerous ground. And the way he writes about this is not that positive thinking is bad, but that positive thinking only can be very bad. And his comment is, we should always be trying to anticipate and predict the negative potential outcomes as well, insofar as we are then prepared for what might go wrong as we're engaging with something. And I think this is huge for runners, because we talk all the time with our athletes, expect the discomfort, expect the challenge and the pain in your running, specifically when we're talking about preparing for races. And if you don't, you're going to be surprised. And this is what Peter Hollins says in the article here. He said, you want to be prepared, not surprised. You're surprised when things don't feel as good as you were hoping, and that's not a good surprise. So when we talk about how the expectation gap, where we expect something to go one way and then it goes a different way, that's a very bad place to be. So we want to anticipate the challenges, I think, is the advice Hollins is giving. And in anticipating them, we prepare for how we're going to handle them when they come. And if they don't, great. We're still thinking positively, but we're not forgetting about the possible difficulties. That's the message. See, that's good, Andy.
It is. I think that it was interesting because where I thought you were going with positive thinking is different than what I think it could have. Like, for instance, if you do experience discomfort, being able to shift that mindset, as Steve Magnus says, that toughness to then a challenge. So you're seeing I think positive thinking is not thinking like only the best result. I feel like positive thinking is shifting your interpretation of the input that you're receiving. So like if you are experiencing certain things, you're able to turn that around towards actionable movements forward. So I guess I agree with what you had said, but when you say positive thinking, I don't necessarily only think like giggles and sunshine.
No, it's not that. Positive thinking is like, I will win, I will be successful, I will achieve my goal. Those are all nice things. However, in close study, they are linked highly with demotivation and poor performance, because nothing ever goes according to plan. As we like to say to our athletes, when you anticipate your training, nothing ever goes according to plan. So we got to prepare for challenges. But yes, yeah. I see your point.
Thank you.
Good things. Well, we have even more good things to share. So how about we just go ahead and get right to it?
This week we have an interview with Dot McMahan. She's a 5-time Olympic trials qualifier, and she's been a competitive distance runner in the U.S. for many years.
You have to be. Do the math here for a second. Olympics only happen every 4 years, most of the time, COVID excluded. And so 5-time qualifier means at a minimum you're talking about, what is that?
20 years.
20 years. Well, 16, but with the front and the back. Anyway, 20 years she's been doing this at a very high level for a long time, and that's incredible.
Absolutely incredible. Most recently, Dot ran a 2:35:22 at Grandma's Marathon to stamp her 5th ticket to the Olympic trials. With that performance, she also broke the Grandma's Marathon's 55-49 age group record. She lowered it by like 3 minutes.
Wow.
It was huge. I've gotten to see Dot perform at many races throughout the years, including her victory last year in 2022 at the Bayshore Marathon, where she broke the course record. And that's just one of many that she's done, but I had the privilege to watch her there. Dot represents Brooks as part of Hansen's Brooks Distance Project, coached by Kevin and Keith Hansen. She has seen a lot of success during her time with them, including representing Team USA 3 times, twice in the half marathon, once in the full marathon. Dot is also a U.S. champion on the roads in the 25K. Notably, Dot has achieved incredible success as a masters runner as well. In this phase of her career, she's conquered various records, wins, and earned numerous accolades, proving that age is no hindrance to greatness. Dot's journey is like the epitome of perseverance, discipline, and triumph through life and being a mom and all of these things. And she has competed at such a high level, and there have been priorities throughout each of these phases and different things that she's learned throughout her running journey that she's sharing with us today. So let's get to the interview with Dot McMahan. Hi, Dot. Welcome to the AtoZrunning podcast.
Hi, Andy. Thanks for having me.
We are so excited to be able to have you on the show right after an amazing milestone accomplishment of qualifying for the Olympic trials at Grandma. So first off, congratulations on that race. It was a phenomenal race. So fast. You ran 2:35:22, and this is now your 5th Olympic trials qualifier. Is that right?
That's correct.
Absolutely incredible. And before this recording, we discussed how this was also an age group Grandma's marathon record, and it was like a long-standing record, 2006 or 2008, and you broke that like by a lot. That was like 2:38 and you ran 2:35:22. So phenomenal race. Let's just, I'm gonna want to go back and like talk about your whole running journey, but let's just start with this race because it just happened. It's fresh. People want to hear about it. And it was just such a cool thing to see how you accomplish this big milestone. Would you mind talking us through that?
Sure. From the very beginning, my coach wanted us to train at 5:55 pace, and that gave us a little bit of cushion to be under 2:37. And kind of my, philosophy during the whole buildup was just keep trusting the process, just keep trusting the paces, because I really felt like the paces fit my goal well. And I didn't want to get caught up in like going too fast or getting too aggressive on long runs, because injuries can pop up when you kind of create that extra fatigue. And I just wanted to just kind of follow the rule book. I've been with my coaches a very long time, and they've seen me through 4 other Olympic trials, and I just wanted to trust them, and whatever they gave me, I wanted to be able to do. I made a sleep priority, kind of hard to do when you have kids and they have their own thoughts about what sleep should look like, especially teenagers. So I really made that a priority this segment, as well as I just tried to always get as much sleep as I could. I always was shooting for like 9 hours of sleep. Sometimes that was 8, sometimes that was 7. But I made that a priority for me this segment. And, fortunately, my daughter kind of got the running bug during this buildup, and she saw the value in it as well. And so that really helped me be able to achieve my goal to, make sleep a priority.
Yeah, I think I had seen some things that you had posted about her competing as well, right? She's a runner competing?
Yeah, she was in middle school, 8th grade. And she has been running for a while, but her background is in competitive gymnastics, and she started running. But, obviously it's very hard to have a mom that's very successful with running and then try to find your own success. And I think she struggled with it. So she actually tried wrestling and did that for a few weeks, and she really liked the running component of wrestling. And, everyone around her was very supportive with her running. They were like, you run the fastest, and then you also keep up on the endurance runs. And they're like, maybe you should just stick to running. And so she kind of started to like understand that maybe this is something I'm really good at. So she basically, she can pinpoint it to a day in which she decided she wanted to be a runner. And I mean, she's just really went for it. And so she had a little bit of indoor season left, and then she trained really hard between indoor and outdoor. And, you know, she had some pretty big success with running middle distance, and she loves it. And now it's, you know, the center of all dinner conversations. And she just got Strava yesterday, and she's like, this is better than Instagram.
That's awesome.
Oh no, we've created a monster.
Well, it's fun that you guys can all share that together. And then during this build up for grandmas, you said that that was helpful, like having those kinds of conversations at the dinner table. I'm sure that was more fun. It made training more fun, maybe a little less mom guilt. I don't know if, you know, a lot of our, any of that.
You know, yeah, I think it just made it easier to help her understand, like, well, I have to go do this. I have to go do a second run, or, you know, well, mom has to get up early in the morning at 6 o'clock. So, cause I have to go to a workout. And even though it's a Saturday or a Sunday, like I can't sleep in, or I can't even sleep till 7 a.m. I have to be up earlier. So I think it's an easier sell when someone else is also going through it. So I imagine you feel that way when you have your husband who's running and you're both trying to accomplish goals, right? It's just easier for everybody to get on board with the same lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you told us a little bit about that build. How about the race itself? Can you talk us through how the race unfolded?
You know, I think this is where I probably have the biggest benefit with being older and having run, this is my 20th marathon that I just ran, is that I'm very patient about how the race develops. I think I have a really good strategy of just staying super chill, and like if the pace needs to be a little bit slow in those, like the first 20 miles, if that's just how the effort feels for the day, then I'm going to go, you know, a couple seconds slow, and it's okay. Because there's so much race left after 20. And so I think I stayed pretty patient within the race. My teammates had gotten in front of me a little bit at a couple points, and I just know I stuck true to what the effort felt like for me. And then at mile 19, it got hard. It happened to be, looking back, my fastest mile. So it makes sense. I did this to myself, that it got hard, and I had to kind of sit with those thoughts. And I think at that point is when I stopped looking at the watch, and I started just back calculating 6-minute miles and then adding a couple minutes for the 0.2. I was adding 2 minutes for the 0.2. And I just kept making sure that I was under 2:37 with the back calculations. I never even looked at what my splits were. And I just kept telling myself, you have to run what feels like under 6-minute pace. And it was very difficult. It's hard to keep going when your body's screaming to stop. But I think I thought about how much I would let my daughter down if I didn't make it. You know, I had never really thought about that before, because during the whole build, I kept thinking about, I'm going to get this qualifier. Like, it's going to hurt. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to do this. And I never really gave myself the space to like not do it. And so that was the first time in the race that I was like, oh my gosh, what if I don't? Like, what if I cross the finish line in 2:37 something or 2:38? Like, that's all possible. And I had to kind of like talk myself out of that negative thought and just keep thinking under 6-minute pace, under 6-minute pace. You can do this. How many times have you run under 6-minute pace? Like, you've done this a million times. So what if you have 6 miles left or 4 miles left? Like, you can do this. I mean, I ran the US 25K champs, and we ran that at 5:54 pace. And, you know, I was like, that's 16 miles. Like, if you can run 16 miles at that pace, like, you can do this. So it's a lot of like time in your own head and talking yourself through it, and really just believing, you know, and taking that risk and that chance that you might fail, and it's okay. But I've really had to focus on the task at hand and just mile by mile.
That's really all that our minds can handle, is the mile by mile at that point, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I love what you said about not being afraid to fail. And I think a lot of us will see a big, dreamy, scary goal, and we're there. Everything says that we are capable, but then in the race, like starting to have those doubts. Is this something that you have always been able to battle through well, or has that been developed over time? What's it like for you as a process through your running career with this moment in a race where you feel like maybe it's not going to come together?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just something that's developed over time. And I've found that if I don't put myself in that position in workouts, if I'm not like overstraining in workouts and trying to reach something in workouts that really doesn't matter, right? So like if your coach gives you, I want you to run 5:55 pace, and then you're like, no, I feel good and I'm going to try to run this next mile under 5:50. If I don't put myself in that in practice, then I actually have the energy to do that in a race. So I'm finding that as I kind of just control that like little bit of crazy we all have in ourselves and just save it for race day, that then I can take that out and go, okay, here it is. You wanted to push the pace. You wanted to go. Remember all those times you wanted to push. Now is your time. Now you get to dig that out and unpack all of that and lay it all out here. So I personally, I think just kind of like saving that for when it's appropriate and not letting that out in workouts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the ramifications then physiologically,
Yep.
and then in the training, it's just not as it's not going to serve you for adaptations nearly as well. So I love that control crazy. I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling like, oh, I really just want to do this. Yeah, so that's good advice there. So we talked about Grandma's Marathon. Let's rewind and go back to the beginning where you were a middle distance runner. Do you want to talk to us about the early years for you, Dot?
Yeah, I think I probably figured out I was a runner earlier than most people. It's kind of a standing joke in the family, but my report card in kindergarten from my gym teacher said, Dottie has the energy of 5 students. And I think that pretty much started my journey towards any kind of sports. I just have always been a high energy individual. And I could really just outrun anyone. I think I just always had like a big endurance base. But that said, this would have been like the 80s, and distance running wasn't quite the same as it is now. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for road races and that kind of thing. So when you're a kid, you're doing, track meets and shorter distances. And I kind of gravitated towards the 1600 when I was younger because not a lot of people race the 1600, and I found that I could win just based on the fact of sheer numbers. So I was definitely motivated to win at a young age. And then as middle school approached, I started doing some shorter stuff, doing some 800s. I loved the 4x4. Definitely like the best race, I feel like. Just so much fun with teammates, and like it's the last event of a track meet. So I love the 4x4. And then kind of as high school came, I dropped running the 1600 and focused on the 800. And then also did the 400 and the 4x2. We had a lot of success at my school. We didn't have a lot of athletes running, but we had a lot of success, like very good top-notch athletes. And so I got to go to the state meet as a freshman on 2 relays, and we ended up winning the state meet. And so like it was just very exciting. And from there, it just kind of grew, and I started to see like my potential in the 400. And then I was recruited at University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee as a 400 runner. I never ran cross country in high school. It wasn't an option. I played volleyball. But the coach at UW-Milwaukee told me that all the 400 runners were going to do just like a simplified version of cross country. So we weren't going to do as much, but we were definitely going to be training in the fall. And so I kind of got pulled into the cross country team, and it just did not take very long for my coach to come up to me and say, you're going to run cross country. And that again is just kind of, I'm very competitive with running, and I just wanted to like be one of the best right away. I had no business being one of the best right away, but I'm just competitive. And so then I started dabbling in cross country and started to learn more about more distance type stuff. But in college, I really did love racing the 800. That became probably my primary focus in college was the 800. And then after college, I started doing more road races, 5Ks, 10Ks. And then I didn't think I ran my first half marathon. I was maybe like 27, 28 years old. And I hated it. I just did not like it. I went out way too hard. I crashed, I burned, and I was like, this is awful. Why do people do this? And then of course I ran another one a couple weeks later because I wanted to get it right. And I had so much fun. I loved the patience of it, of like just chill, 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 chill. And then when it's time to turn it on, it's time to turn it on. And I fell in love with half marathons. And then so I was working full time. My husband was working, and he got a job opportunity in Michigan. And I was like, oh, I don't want to like move from Wisconsin. Like this is home for me, and this is very scary. And then I remembered an article I read in Running Times about the Hansons. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to reach out to Kevin Hansen via email, sent him my running resume. And he said, well, you're not going to run middle distance stuff here. And I said, I realize that. He said, but I got to have you come visit. And he still does this today. You come visit, you have to see if you mesh well with the other teammates. And if, you get along with everybody and it seems like a good fit, they'll let you come out. So it's kind of what happened. It was a huge risk. So we gave up 2 full-time jobs, a very comfortable, living. And my husband did not have a salary. And so it was very risky to not have any money, but it ended up being the best thing for both of us. And the Hansons have been so wonderful to me. They've really elevated my game, turned me into a marathoner, and it's truly probably what I'm best at.
Mm-hmm. So how many years have you been with them now?
I joined in 2005, so
oh, wow,
18 years.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah, it is a long time.
Their kids grow up and, all those things.
Yeah. And I feel like that also gives the opportunity for your coach to really know you to have that connection throughout those years. And you said, yeah, they brought me through now to my 5th Olympic trials qualifier, right. But a lot has happened too, like not only those Olympic trials qualifiers, but making world teams. And let's actually start though with your first marathon. Can you talk us through your first marathon, when that was and what that was like for you? Because you said at first you hated the half marathon. Was that the same story for the marathon?
No, the marathon was a great experience. We trained for 2:45, which was the OTQ at the time. And this was in 2006, I believe, 2006. And it was a month shy of my 30th birthday, so kind of late to the marathoning. And it went really, really well. It was Chicago. I was able to negative split. I ran 2:43, and I fell in love with it. The whole beast of the marathon is, it's hard to explain unless you've done one or, like been able to put yourself in that kind of pain, but it is something that's like super exciting and you feel like you accomplished something. And yeah, I loved it. And I was like, this is for me, and then obviously, qualifying for the Olympic trials, like it just, it sounds cool. And like, it feels like a really big accomplishment, and it is. So, I think that brings a different excitement to the table than say running, a road 5K, which, those are fun at a different level, but it's not the same as like qualifying for the trials. So yeah, I mean, I loved it right away, right from the gun.
Oh, that's awesome. So I want to dive into because we have the opportunity to talk to you, and you have so much experience. You're a coach yourself. You have so much wisdom and experience in the sport. So during that time, priorities wise, how you're taking care of yourself when you made the switch from doing shorter distances on the road to longer distances on the road, did anything change? Was there anything you learned about prioritization or lifestyle that contributed to your success?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I went from running, 60 some miles a week to running 120. I mean, there's a total change in life. Like I had mentioned, the sleep priority, but even just how you fuel throughout the day. I had never really run double runs before. Just being able to maintain energy throughout the day. And it's still something, I'm not gonna say I struggle with it, but it's something that I am very hyper aware of. If I start to feel really exhausted by the end of the day, or I know that I probably didn't fuel properly. So I think it's something you just become hyper aware of, and you basically, you just don't leave the house without food, like you always have it on you. Because if it hits, you just eat, and there's no like, oh well, I have to do a second run in a few hours. No, you just eat. And I think that's, you kind of lose that, oh, I have to wait so many hours for my food to digest. No, you eat and then you run, and it's fine. Like you just learn to power through it. And it's been fun watching my daughter kind of go through that as well. She'll just be like, oh, my friend texted me to go for a run, and she's like in the middle of eating a sandwich, and she's like, it's okay, I'll just go for a run. And I'm like, wow, okay. Like she has a good head on her shoulders about this. Like you don't have to like be so like picky about when you run, and like, how much time does it take for your food to digest? You just go.
Yeah. I had friends that tease me I'm the snack lady because I always have snacks.
Nice.
But you have to have snacks. Yep.
I think it's best for everyone, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. And we were the same way growing up. Like my mom, we'd eat this big family dinner, and then we'd go out for a run together right after. And when Zach joined the family, my husband Zach,
Yeah.
he's also a runner. He was like, how do you guys do that? How do you guys just like go? But we do. It's the family time too. So if you're running chill enough, it's not going to bother you too bad. But I love that. That's really great. Being cognizant of just your needs, your sleep, the food that it takes. Now at that point, you run your first marathon, you qualify for the Olympic trials. What happens next?
We run Boston because the Olympic trials in 2008 were in Boston. And so we wanted to, it's kind of like a dry run, right? Like, even though it wasn't the same course, it's just like you're flying into the same airport, you're like the landscape all looks the same, right? And that ended up being a nor'easter year. It was a horrible experience. My second marathon was a horrible experience. My expectation for Boston was that there was going to be a lot of people on the course cheering, and it just wasn't. It was just, the weather was so miserable. No one was out there cheering. So it wasn't a great experience. And then my third marathon was the 2008 Olympic trials. And I trained pretty hard for that. Like we definitely were emptying the tank a lot in workouts. And so I made a pretty big jump in time. So I'd run 2:43s. And then at the trials, I ran 2:35. And so that was like a really big jump. And I placed eighth, I believe. Yeah, eighth place. And so that was like super exciting, right? Like it was just like, never did I think about what place I was going to get. And that, that's only a few spots away from making the Olympic team. And things just became very real of like, this is something that's super exciting. Ironically, at the exact same time, the biological clock, the light switch went off, and I was like, I think I need to have a baby. And it literally was like, I was at the highest point at that point of my running career. And I was like, if I don't do this, I'm never going to do this. Like, it's going to be scary. It's going to be hard, but this is something that I want to do. So obviously it became a conversation with my husband, and we decided to try to have a baby. We got pregnant a few months later and ended up having my daughter in 2009. And I was able to run through the majority of my pregnancy. I have some thoughts on that, but coming back after having her was a challenge. I think we've made some really big progress with how we handle women coming back from childbirth, and I think it's really good. I think there's a lot more conversations about it, right? Like, this is back in 2009. There no one was really having babies and coming back. So there was Dina, there was Kara, there was myself, and so Blake Russell also had her son then. So, it was just kind of a small group of people that you could really lean on. And we did lean on each other. And then we had talked about this before we started recording, but I ran my best marathon after having my daughter, and not without some setbacks. I ran a marathon before my PR marathon that I felt like was a complete disaster. Looking back now, I was being very overdramatic because it was a 2:35 and it was totally fine, and it was just a necessary step. But I did run my PR at grandma's, and I felt like it's kind of a magical place for me. So I'm not surprised that I didn't run well this time, because I have a lot of good energy there, right? It's just, you have good vibes, and I love Duluth, and it when you're thinking about how you're going to accomplish this big goal, like loving the place that you're going to do it in makes a huge difference, so yeah, kind of a little bit there. I forget even how we started this, but this is where we ended up.
Yeah. So after having your daughter, you didn't have as much of like the conversations. There weren't good conversations about it. You leaned on the other women who had been through it, or were going through it at the same time as you. What things did you have to look at or change, or mindset shifts during that phase that helped you to be able to return to run so well? Was there anything during that time that was informative for you?
Again, it always comes back to like being patient with yourself and your body. And I think at that point is when I realized, like, doing drills and really preparing yourself to run before the run became very, very valid. And it still is to this day. There's lots of mobility and foam rolling and, hypervolt, and all of those things have become necessary in order for the body to warm up. You can't just roll out of bed and go for a run. I mean, I there's just no way. So I think that was something I had to learn after having my daughter. And then just, giving myself grace, which is something else I kind of repeat to a lot of my own athletes, is you have to give yourself grace. There's going to be times when, you can't get a run in, and it's okay, because that's life. And just giving myself the space to make mistakes and have setbacks, like, oh, I probably pushed too hard on this, and now my hamstring's sore, and now I've got to go get treatment for this, and just kind of accepting things as they come, living a little bit more day by day. And while you keep those big goals out in front of you, I really try to celebrate every day that I'm able to accomplish what I want to accomplish. I think we don't do that enough in life. We're always just trying to think of doing more. We're not really celebrating the fact that we actually did what we were set out to do for the day. We don't have to get so far out of, and stressing about, well, I've got all this stuff coming up and I've got to work out in 2 days that I'm really scared about. And it's like, it's going to happen. You don't have to stress about it. Just get through today's run, get through tomorrow's run, and then it's workout day. And just, I think that having kids has really helped me chill out about those types of things and just kind of sit back and enjoy the process and not get so wound up in, wanting things too quickly, and that, how like impatient you are as a kid. You're like, I want Christmas to be here. I want Christmas to be here. Can I just open one gift? And it's just learning to just savor the buildup and savor that the day is coming and it's going to be great. I think that's something that kids really help you learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they do bring out the patience in us in lots of ways, right?
Yeah.
Goodness. Yeah, it is a great lesson to learn, and it does translate so well to the run and put stuff in perspective. And I think that enduring perspective of being able to celebrate the process and enjoy when we get out for those runs, and then having to give ourselves grace, those are all really key components to continue to be consistent, because then we don't throw our hands in the air and say, I've failed, I can't do this anymore. Having that grace allows for us to be more consistent, and from what it looks like, success for many years.
I do want to talk about your representation for Team USA because I just think that's so interesting. Would you mind talking us through some of those races as well?
So when I joined the team in 2005, we knew that my first big race was going to be the USATF 20K championships, and from that they would decide who will be on the half marathon championship team. And so it's a little bit like you have to race well, but then also other people have to turn down the position. And I got lucky enough that I think I placed maybe 8th or something like that at the US championship. And enough people said no, and it came down to me. So I was able to make a world team kind of what I would consider right away after joining the Hanson's team. It was just a couple months later. And my teammate, Mike Morgan, at the time also made the team. So that made it a ton of fun because here we are, 2 relatively new teammates. We're both making a world team. And then once you do it, once you make a world team, you want to do it again. It's definitely like you've gotten a taste of all this special treatment that you get, and everyone thinks you're just amazing, and you're surrounded by the world's best athletes, and you want to do it again. So I was able to qualify for another world championship half marathon team. And let's see, that would have been 2008 in Rio. And that was super fun. At the time, my teammate, Melissa, also made the team. So we got to go together again, just special in that way. I was actually pregnant with my daughter, but it was very, very soon, or very early. And so I always tell her, that was our first race together. And I actually ran really well. I didn't always feel great leading up to that, but when the race came, I felt amazing. And I felt like I really was able to put the best race out there for me at the time. And then I've qualified for the World Marathon team, which is really kind of a bigger deal because it's only 3 people in the US, and most people don't turn it down. So I believe I qualified for that at Chicago. I had run a 2:32 marathon, and it just happened to put me in the top 3 positions for the year. And when I got offered that, I was just like, this is basically my Olympics. I had been 8th at the trials, and then I was 9th in 2012, and this was 2013. So to me, this was going to be my Olympics. So that was in Moscow. And to this day, I still think that was probably my best training of my life leading up to that marathon. I just had some killer long runs where I was running, 20 miles under 6-minute pace, on dirt roads. I mean, this is without super shoes. This is, this is just pure guts. And the training was just unbelievable. And I felt like I probably could have run a better race, but it was August in Moscow, middle of the day, not great race conditions, but I still had a ton of fun, and I felt like I raced well. I mean, a lot of people just didn't even finish that race, and these are the top runners in the world, and they didn't finish the race. So I'm always really proud of that race, just from that component, just kind of being tough enough. And then also, we talked a little bit about strategy, just kind of being smart enough to just be like, okay, this is too fast. This is too much energy right now. I've got to readjust here and slow down a little bit so that I can push later, and I can finish this and be proud of myself. And not freaking out about, failing or not being able to do something, just being able to adjust out, taking in fluids and managing your energy that way with fuel. So lots of really great things came out of that race, but I was very happy with that race. Gosh, I think I was maybe 23rd in the world. But I mean, just amazing to finish in the stadium in Moscow, and just, such a unique place to visit as well. done some traveling. I've been to Japan, all over Europe, but Moscow is a different story.
That is so cool. Wow. And during that training cycle, then you said it was probably one of your best leading in. Any distinctions there, that anything in that process and that lead in that stand out to you?
I mean, I had some workouts that I had really not been able to tap into before. At the time, I think I kind of had a lot of different people doing workouts with me, but I was doing a lot on my own, which is not my comfort zone. But I was doing a little bit more on my own. And I think that at that point was, a boost for me to be like, well, wait a minute, I'm doing this on my own. Like, this is a big deal. So, I mean, I always recommend people, always train with people, like run with people, but also you get a lot of confidence from training on your own and doing your own thing and pushing yourself. And just, I think training through the summer for that was also a little bit different. I had never run a marathon in August. So that kind of brought a different element to the table. I really did have to like be on top of like drinking enough fluids on runs. I remember Kevin and Keith bringing fluids on like 12-mile days, being like, well, you got to drink. You can't, do this without, getting hydration on the run. And they were 100% right. I mean, just being able to practice that on the run. I mean, that's one of the benefits of having coaches, right where you live, who can show up to runs and help you out with that stuff. I know that's like something not everybody has, but I think it's a huge benefit when you're trying to adapt to certain race conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even during your training, if you were to like get dehydrated, like the recovery time would be so much greater after that
Yes.
too. And you just can't train the way you need to train if you don't have the hydration you need. So yeah, that's a lot of people are listening to this when we air it in the summertime. So let this be a reminder to you, even if you don't have Kevin and Keith giving you water, go bring your water with you, bring your hydration.
Carry it or plan a route that's near fountains or, but you really need more than just water. But like, yeah, it's absolutely necessary. Carry fuel on you. It's stop for water when you see water. But yeah, it's so important.
So we've talked about quite a few important races in your running career, but there's more we haven't talked about. Do you have other Olympic trials that you've run? Do you want to talk us through some of the ones that stand out to you?
I would say my first two probably stand out to me the most, just because I think I was a little surprised at how well I did. So that made it really fun. And then the next two, we were put in kind of some tough conditions in 16 and in 20. 16 was more of heat in LA. It was very hot, very similar to what I had raced in Moscow. But I thought that I did get a little bit like cocky about it. And I was like, I'm better than this. Like I can push. And I really didn't listen to my own advice. And I probably pushed a little bit more than I should have. So that one didn't go particularly well. And then 20, the course was very hilly and windy. And so that was kind of an element that, we thought we kind of had prepared for on the team, but I think it definitely took more of a toll than we had planned on. So while all Olympic trials are super fun, I think those two kind of fell short for me. So I'm at 50% right now. Where two I'm really proud of, and then two I'm like, that didn't go quite as I planned. So we'll see what number 5 brings.
Yeah. Speaking of which, tell me about how you feel about Orlando and running that race in February and your thoughts of the lead in. I know we talked before we hopped on the recording just about the questions you've been getting and all of that. If you want to unpack that for us, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So, a lot of people are asking me already, like, what's your plans for the trials? Like, what do you hope for? And I really haven't thought that far in advance, because just qualifying to me was going to be difficult. And, I just really wasn't thinking about anything beyond that. So now that I'm here and I have qualified and I can think about the trials a little bit, I think I'll hit a few roadblocks. It's February. The rest of my team, that anyone who's qualified is going to go to Florida in December. I believe, and train there. So they're all going to be super ready for whatever Orlando brings, and I think that's amazing. I just don't find myself in a personal situation where I can leave in December and not come home until February. I really need to be here, do the mom thing. And I don't really mind training in the winter, to be honest. But that said, I will make, some changes to my plan as necessary because of weather or cold, that kind of thing. So I'm always a little bit nervous about training in the winter. Like I've trained for 5 Bostons in the winter. You really have to be flexible with your training. And so I think I'm going to take that approach. And because I'm not training with teammates, I can be flexible. So just kind of some of my thoughts. I'm not really sure how fit I can really get because of the conditions here in Michigan. But I also will have, my daughter will be running indoor track. I volunteer coach at Oakland University, so there'll be an indoor season. So I will be around a lot of like people hyped up about it, and that will probably help me. And I know I can, run with the OU kids if, I kind of need help, or I'm kind of like lonely and like, oh, I haven't run with anybody for days. So I know that I have a situation in which I can lean on people, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. This is just popping into my head, putting on the spot, but how much do you use the treadmill? And I know this is always a conversation that is had amongst runners, but what is your usage and how do you manage that within your training in the winter?
So being on the Hanson's team, we meet at 8 a.m. every day. And so the morning run usually gets run outside no matter what the conditions are. But we have double runs in the afternoon in which I have no problem jumping on the treadmill. Sometimes it's just mentally, I need the break from being outside. I want to feel safe, right? Because I always say I'm like one injury away from retirement. Like if I fall, I'm not going to be in any rush to come back. It's just going to be hard. So I will utilize the treadmill. As far as like doing workouts on the treadmill, I've not really done that before. I've done some long runs on treadmills. So I'm not opposed to that at all. I think they definitely have their place. But from my understanding, we're supposed to have a mild winter here in Michigan. So I'm kind of hoping for that. And I'm also not, I'll travel. If it means I've got to drive 45 minutes to get to a space that's clear, or if I have to run at like 10 a.m., I can do that. Mm-hmm. So I'll adjust.
Yeah. So adjusting, patience, taking care of your body, hydration, nutritional needs, doing your pre-run routines.
Yes.
Foam rolling. I've heard you say all of these things. Anything else you want to add?
I really just can't stress taking things day by day and just kind of letting each day build on the training segment. I think that's my biggest takeaway. And I think that's what contributed to my success at Grandma's this time specifically, is just not getting too worried about, the big picture all the time, just taking it day by day and just letting that build, and just trusting the process, and not getting too consumed with, I'm openly admit here, I did not finish a workout this segment. I just kind of got overwhelmed with other things going on in my life that I just stopped. And I just said, this wasn't my day. And I kind of had to make sure that I didn't feel so badly about myself that it affected the rest of my segment. And so we work out at this Metro Park. And I tell people all the time that by the time I leave that Metro Park after a workout, whether it was good or bad, it's out of my mind. And I let it go, whatever it is. I just don't get too excited. And I also don't get too depressed about workouts, because guess what? You got another one coming in 3 days, so you just don't have time to sit there and feel bad about it. And then also not overcompensating. So I didn't go out the next day and just hammer the run, because that doesn't make any sense either. So I think that's just letting the days build and not getting too worried about all the little things happening
Yeah, that's super good advice. That's what we can do, is what we have for the day, and trying to fulfill the purposes for that day and not mess up the rest of the week by trying to
Yes.
show ourselves that we can. I think that's really
Right.
powerful advice. Well, I wish we could continue, because we have so much that we could talk about. You have so much to share, and I just have had such a great time chatting with you today. And on behalf of my audience, we want to thank you for sharing all of this and congratulate you on another Olympic trials qualifier. Is there anything else that you want to add before we are done with our talk today?
Well, I want to thank you for like being out on race courses. Anytime I'm in Michigan, I swear I see you or Zach, and you guys always recognize me and cheer for me by name. And I just really appreciate that, because the running community really is so small, and but yet so big. And I appreciate that, and I hope that that's something that I'm bringing to the table here with being in the sport for 20 years and, marathoning, and just, I love that people feel comfortable enough to reach out and talk to me, and I'm happy to share anything about any part of my journey. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you for also being a part of the running community through your podcast, but also just personally, just out on random running courses out there.
Thank you. Well, we love it. And we love cheering for you. And we hope to at the trials as well. So thank you, Dot.
Oh,
Love connecting
yeah.
with you. It's been great.
Thanks, Andy.
Yes, well, definitely. Thanks again, Dot, for sharing your experiences and insights. We always appreciate the time. Speaking of things we appreciate, the people going out and running and just having a blast, and this is always something we love sharing about. So we kick off the World of Running segment with some of our folks who have been doing a lot of the fun stuff. Bill ran a 5K, finishing 3rd overall, and CJ ran a 5K in a PR time. It was a pretty substantial, correct me if I'm wrong,
seconds,
CJ,
right?
but about 30 official 30 seconds, because he ran a PR in a training run not too long ago here too. But second age group as well in that race. Nice work, CJ. Jacob ran a 5K, second in his age group. Well done. Jackie ran a 5K, and that's her first now post-surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always a big hurdle.
And side note, awesomeness to this with Jackie is that her daughter ran her first 5K with Jackie
Oh, that's
in this
fun.
race. So they got to do it together. So it was her daughter's first and then Jackie's first from surgery. So very
things.
precious. Love it.
Precious things. And Sarah competed in a triathlon. Why not?
Why not?
Well done, Sarah. So good things. And speaking of, we have some exciting things to share with you from the world of running. The Diamond League was very active in the last week.
Which is like not great timing for our USA folks, because they're gearing up for USA's, where that's their opportunity to qualify for world championships on the track. So we didn't see a lot of US runners.
Yeah, U.S. Championship starts on July 6th, so you'll hear more about that soon. It's always a thrilling
subscribe
event.
to this podcast, because you're going to get our recap next week.
And it's going to be awesome. Well, we don't know how the meet's going to go, but the recap's going to be awesome. All right, so that being the case, there were 2 Diamond League meets in as many days. Well, actually, it was in 3 days. There's 2 days between them. So the way they do this is, as we've shared in the past, the Diamond League is not like every meet is like this full-on, everything is involved in it. Each meet has a subset of events that they will feature. And what they tend to do is they have this kind of rolling, rotating schedule, so that basically every meet or 2 or 3, you get a chance to see every event. And so it's just kind of extended in that way. It also makes for shorter coverage, which I think is important, because for most people, they're not going to sit down and watch a 5-hour track and field event. But they would watch 2 hours, for instance. And so the Diamond League meets are all basically about 2 hours, unless you stick around for the pole vault, the extra hour and a half of pole vault coverage. Oh, the pole vault's so much fun.
That's because it was raining and they weren't doing it throughout the event.
Yeah, usually the pole vault is one of those, because the pole vault itself takes like 3 hours to do, because there's a lot of time in between everything. There's not a lot happening. So the pole vault usually begins near the beginning of the meet and just runs through the whole entire meet, and they kind of just vault in between other things that are happening, or something like that. Well, this time the weather was terrible at one of these meets, and so the pole vault started a little bit later than normal and went a little longer than usual for other reasons. We'll get to that. We're not going to really talk a lot about the pole vault specifically, but we'll get to that meet in a moment. First was Lausanne in Switzerland. And this one in particular was not necessarily, it's like we've just had so many big meets lately, and it's like, how many more times can you hype another like great race coming? Is someone going to attempt another record? All that kind of stuff. And it was kind of like, I don't know if people are going to try to do those kinds of crazy things here. Well, they still did crazy things.
Yes, they did.
And maybe it wasn't on purpose or deliberate, or rather planned, but it happened. So let's start with the men's 5,000. Very exciting. In this particular event, we had some of the greats, which seems to be just the case every time right now, not least of which Joshua Cheptegei, the current world record holder and Olympic champion, world champion. He wins lots of stuff. Salomon Barega, who is Olympic champion, 10,000 meters. I think it was 10,000 meters. And also Berihu Aragawi, both then from Ethiopia. And Aragawi specifically he's had a hard time winning at the championship level. And my only assumption is because he's not known to be quite as strong of a kicker as other runners.
Yep.
He's won the Diamond League circuit before.
Okay.
He did that not terribly long ago. And he won the Ethiopian 10,000 meter trials a week ago. So
he wins a lot. He knows how to win.
He knows how to win, but at the championship level races, he has not really performed super well. But he put some doubts in the doubters' minds here in this race, because here's what happened. This was crazy. All right, they have pacers, right? And the pacers usually are given a certain pace, and then they put the lights on the track. If you haven't seen this, they have these lights now that follow the runners. Actually, they're trying to lead the runners on the track right next to lane one, like on the rail.
And it's a requested pace. It's
Yeah,
not
they talk
necessarily
with the
like
runners.
a certain pace. It's not always a world record pace.
No.
It's not always a meeting record pace. It's dependent on the group.
Yeah, they talk with the runners about what they want, and then they decide and set it. I don't really know whose opinion matters the most there, but clearly it's only some of the runners.
Probably
that
the fastest
whoever's
time,
planning on running
I'm
fastest.
guessing.
Yeah,
the fastest time that for the lights.
Yeah, could be. Yep. So the lights were set at 12:55, which for this kind of a field is not terribly fast. And so already you kind of expect, like, they're really just not planning on going out and trying to run a crazy fast time here. They just want to kind of compete well. And so that's the tone that's set here when they tell pacers they don't want to go too fast. So the pacers run what they were supposed to run, which is great. And as soon as the pacers step off the track, I don't know exactly when it was, like just about halfway. As soon as they step off the track, Aragawi puts the pedal to the metal, floors it, goes from running this 12:55 pace to a 60 seconds flat in a lap, which if that were like the whole race, that's world record pace. So that's actually way under world record pace. And so he starts just dropping these laps, and he does not relent. And every single lap, I see that split, and Andy can attest to this. I'm like, what is happening
He's like, he
here?
can't
What is he
keep
doing?
this? He can't keep doing that.
There's no way he can hold
can't.
this. And yet he keeps holding it. And it gets to the point where this world-class field of runners is just one by one dropping off. Salomon Barega, his countryman, who was second in the trials to Aragawi a week ago, he couldn't even hack it. And he's run this kind of a time, or very nearly this kind of a time before. But he's just gone from this kind of like strong, comfortable pace for these caliber athletes to like breakneck speed, and they don't like it. So they're fading out. It gets to the point where only Cheptegei, world record holder, who has run faster than this, but not much, and Aragawi, that's all that's left, right? And Cheptegei is doing everything he can to hang on to Aragawi.
It's
like
true.
He's clearly being tested here.
Right.
And it's lap after lap of 59.60, like just, and so do the math here. He's running under 4 minute mile pace now, and he's got half of 5,000 left to run. His last 3,000 meters were 7:30, which by itself is one of the best 3,000 meter times that anyone's run in the world this year. And he did it in this race. So that's all to say. They get to the last lap, and it looks like Cheptegei's got a little bit of like something extra, right? He's rallying a bit. Aragawi accelerates again, but Cheptegei stays with him, which I was shocked to see that. When Aoregawi put down even faster, I was like, there's no way he's going to hold, and yet he did. They get around to the point where they're at 100 meters to go, final straightaway, and Cheptegei still is rallying, starts gaining again on Aoregawi, and Aoregawi has another gear, which is unheard of for him. He never has a kick like this. And with 50 meters to go, he puts, I don't know, a second on Cheptegei to win the race in 12:40 flat, which is the number 5 all-time 5,000 meter performance, meeting record, world leading time, which is saying something because there was a massive epic battle just a week ago in another Diamond League race, 2 weeks ago actually, in another Diamond League race. And so this marks now the third time this season that a 5,000 meter has come down to some epic head-to-head battle that was like almost a photo finish. The third time. And they're different people each time. Well, actually, Yamif Kejelcha was battling 2 of those races. He won 1 and lost 1. But we're talking about like just crazy racing right now.
So exciting.
So cool. If you haven't noticed, I'm really excited.
Yeah, well, it just speaks to the excitement that it's building for the World Championships coming up.
Yeah, I really just hope that all these guys have it on that day, and it's just this massive, thunderous race of the best 5,000 meter runners of all time.
So do you really think that the next one is that interesting with the men's 1,500
well, that's
meter
just
run?
It's not after that. So that's why we started with that one, because the 1,500 was actually first.
Well, we'll just briefly go through it. Jakob Ingebrigtsen won it again.
Well, there you go. That's the summary.
That's the summary.
That's just what he does. He has not lost a race yet this season. I mean, he really just doesn't ever lose races except for once in a great while. But as it were, he once again looked like maybe he was going to be tested. Lamicha Girma, who's the world record holder recently in the steeplechase, as well as indoor 3,000 meters. So Girma's got it. He can run. And he looked like he was going to push Ingebrigtsen to the line, like give him something to have
Which
to
is cool to
work
see
for.
because this is not his predominant event, obviously.
Not in the least bit.
Steeplechases.
He has a good fast middle distance time.
Yeah.
But not at that level. Not with Jakob. Well, he didn't end up being able to test him because what happens
is it was a good showing for him.
Yeah, it was a good showing, but what happens is Ingebrigtsen looks like he's like vulnerable.
Yeah, he
with
looked
200
like he was
to go,
laboring pretty hard.
150 to go, 100 to go, and then suddenly he just takes off. It's like, oh, he was just waiting longer, I guess. I don't even know what to think about that. He runs 3:28. Lamicha Girma, by the way, a new Ethiopian national record.
That's
3:29.
That's so big. Yeah.
And it should be noted, Josh Kerr of Great Britain was coming on fast behind them. And he was looking good. If he looks that good in the World Championships, he's a medal threat for sure because that was a very impressive finish. He ran under 3:30 as well. Not a personal best, which I guess, that's saying something. The guy's got some good fast times under his belt. But some good racing all around. It was fun.
Next one is the women's 800-meter run, which was a bit of an upset because everyone's eyes were on Great Britain's Keely Hodgkinson, the youngster who opened her season with a time of 1:55, which was a national record. So everyone was like
record,
a European record. So everyone was like looking at her, but it was Kenya's Mary Mora who controlled the race and then also won.
Yeah.
In a time of 1:57. So it was not how you'd expect it to unfold because usually, not always, but usually there is some sort of mix up in the end, because Mary Mora led it and she was doing all that work, but of course she's a very strong runner and she ended up holding everybody off. So
yeah,
but more than
contend,
that, she had some little bit of space.
She did, yeah. She finished well. She put about a full second on Keely in a 1:57 over a 1:58. But I contend that I think that Hodgkinson is easily flustered. And this was a race where things didn't go the way she wanted them to, clearly, like especially in the start, in the early stages. And then when she was trying to kind of do some things and make some moves, people weren't responding. Ideally, there was definitely not a definitive she was gonna have it. It wasn't evident at any point in time, and so she kind of looked like she just was not. She wasn't in that same kind of free flying groove that she sometimes has.
Yeah. I think it's when she's running someone else's race and not her own.
Yeah.
Like if it's something, and that we talked about this before with championship racing, but then also these shorter distances, that a lot of times there is someone who's controlling. Either they're controlling themselves by sitting behind knowing that they will have the kick, or someone leading out front that's like, I'm going to run this time and I'm going to try to get this space because I'm not as strong of a kicker. There's all kinds of methodology and strategy when it comes to both championship racing and then also races like the 800. But when she was not in a spot where she had as much of a touch on Mary Mora, because she was actually a few people back.
Yeah, she never quite had
was
contact on Mora.
Yeah. So I think that she felt like she wasn't in control, and I think that's a tough place to be in the 800 when you feel like you don't have access to the outside to get around, and you're not linked up with the first place person as closely as you'd like to be.
Yeah, my overall impression about racing at the world-class level is just at the world-class level. Competition in general in running races seems to be the case that the person who believes that the thing is happening the way they want it to tends to have an advantage over everyone else simply by that confidence, that belief that this is what I want it to be.
That's it right there. And we talked to, remember, Alicia Munson on the podcast about how she imagines every scenario and imagines overcoming it and being able to have a good race, which is super powerful and amazing advice, especially in this kind of situation, because then you can feel like in all of these situations, I have control to still have my best race possible. I think it's
something like this idea of you're playing right into my hand, and no matter what you do, it's playing right into my hand, and that's if you can convince yourself of that. Yeah.
But I think there's a takeaway there for all of us, though, because I think we can all think of every situation and imagine overcoming it.
That was Peter Holland's advice at the beginning of the show, if you recall.
Okay.
Yeah. Anticipate the challenges.
Anticipate the challenge, and then imagine yourself overcoming it. And like Zach said, well, what is victory? Okay, it's downpour. What is victory today? So you imagine that scenario and you imagine yourself overcoming it, and then you're not super mad and flustered and disappointed because your time might be slower that day. No, you imagine yourself as a victor going through the rain, finishing, and I'm being dramatic here, but I think it's an important scenario.
Well, we'll get to the rain in a moment, because that's relevant. But
that was on the mind. That's probably why.
The women's steeple also was a good representation of what's to come in the World Championships, or at least some things to anticipate. Because world record holder Beatrice Chepkwech of Kenya was tested, I think, a bit because she has not necessarily been running fast yet this season, and Ethiopia's Sembo Almayu, who's only 18 years old, kind of is running like she's got something to prove, which makes sense, because she does, because she's 18 years old. She hasn't been doing this very long yet. And so up against the world record holder, Almayu was like pushing
fearless
and taking the lead and changing up the rhythm. And so she was definitely kind of controlling the race. But it's clear in this instance that Chepkwech was just simply able to handle anything anyone else was going to do, and so she ended up with a little bit stronger finish, won the race by only about a second. But it was evident that they were testing her a bit, and Almayu in particular was showing some promise, which is always fun.
Yeah, Almayu was looking eager.
Yeah, that's like she wanted it, and she wanted it her way, which is good.
It was kind of slow for a bit, right? And it's like, I don't know if it started fast or not, but like there was a stage where she was like, this is not fast enough for me. And that's when she was chomping at the bit and trying to go around the leaders. And she did. She was leading for a little bit, right?
Yeah, and for a fair bit. And some will say, they'll judge a situation like that. Was it inexperience, and that's why she lost the race? I think, in fact, she was running more like an experienced runner who knows how to win a race like that than she was like an inexperienced runner who's just kind of doing things impulsively. So whatever it may be, Almayu definitely showed, once again, she's been proving herself to be a threat on the world stage here in the Diamond Circuit. Mm-hmm. It's good. All right, so that was Lausanne. But then
A couple days later.
2 days later, in Stockholm, Sweden, was the next Diamond League. And then this one, what they essentially did is they took all of the events that the men did and flipped them so that the women did those events. And all the events that the women did in the previous meet, the men did. So it is literally just a reverse of whatever the events were not featured in the previous one, which makes sense because they're 2 days apart.
So starting with the women's 5,000, Beatrice Chebet of Kenya is showing how strong she is in this circuit and in this event. She was the silver medalist last World Championship and the World Cross Country Championship. But the really big news or the surprising thing about this race was her final lap, which was
very impressive.
So incredibly fast. It's making me think like Faith Kipyegon fast. 59 seconds.
59 seconds.
59 seconds is so fast.
We have to dwell on this a second because in the men's 5,000 in Lausanne, they finished in 55, 56 seconds. Like this would have been a respectable finish in the men's race.
Yeah.
And I'm just having a hard time even knowing how to react to this presently.
Wow. So fast. That's my reaction. It's so fast.
I mean, so there's
under
at least
4-minute mile pace in her
Yeah.
5,000 meter run for her kick.
there's something. So I've been seeing some kind of rumblings on this a little bit because Faith Kipyegon's done it, Beatrice Chebet's done it. There's been a few women who have been finishing that fast, under 60 seconds like that. But you have to remember that their overall time is still like 2 minutes slower than the men's time in the race, and so there's a question here about like there's a maximum speed that just people are not going to run much faster than this while they're finishing races. And it's somewhere for the men in the 52 to 55 second range. Occasionally you see someone close a race in 51 seconds. For the women, it's like 58 to 60 second range. And it's like, I don't know if you'll really see anyone go any faster than that. They're pretty close together in those finishing times, though, which is crazy. Anyway, so she finished very fast and just crushed everybody.
And then Lemlem Hailu, she was the second place finisher, and she was 2 seconds behind Chebet. So that was good. And then Sarah Chalengat set a new Ugandan record in fourth place finish with a time of 14:40. So it was a really good race. I mean, it was a fast race.
It was fast, which was
surprising, right?
Well, it wasn't that fast in terms of like the front runners because
was it raining as hard during this race?
No, it wasn't as much by that time, but it was still so Stockholm was very bad weather. You know this because they just talked about it nonstop the whole meet, and in all of the post-race interviews, every one of the runners mentioned the weather.
Complained.
So they didn't like it.
So
it was rainy and cold.
This fast, I think.
Yeah, I think so, but so to the point, like Lemlem Hailu's run like almost 20 seconds faster than that.
Okay.
Beatrice Chebet's run.
But for
actually,
Sarah
that was a PR.
Chalengat.
That was a PR, I think, for Beatrice Chebet. I'll have to go back and look at that.
Okay.
She does not have super fast 5,000 time, but
comparatively.
Right. Okay, so good things there. And the women's 1,500 meters was it was a tactical race. They definitely, like, the pacers went out on the pace set and no one really wanted to do it. And so midway through the race, they were all like slowing down a bunch and bunching up a ton. And it's like, oh man, they're going to do that thing where all the milers think they've got the best finish and they just wait until the last lap. Well, who had the best finish this time? Freweny Hailu of Ethiopia, because she ran her last lap in 59 seconds. So if you can do that, chances are you're going to win the race in these types of races. That was incredible. So I mentioned it earlier. There's another one. And it was an Ethiopian sweep, 1, 2, 3, with Deribe Welteji and Hirut Mashesha as well.
Yeah. And this was a surprising race. And I only mention it because it just goes to show that sometimes things don't always work out for top runners. But Laura Muir had a hard time in this race. This was
Great
not
Britain's star.
Yeah.
Yep.
This was not a good race for her. So.
Well, she looked great until the last 100. And then she didn't have that finish, and all those other ones were finishing much, much faster, and she kind of fell apart a bit.
But, this is stuff that happens. And when you're that sharp, there's going to be days where you're not as sharp.
Well, and it may be by design. You have to keep in mind that they're training for the World Championships. Laura Muir, for sure, is not thinking more about the Diamond League than she is about the World Championships. Right. And so it may just be that with what she's doing in training right now, she's not as sharp and will be later. So we'll see. And speaking of interesting races, we close it out here with the men's steeplechase because Soufiane El Bakkali came back again for another Diamond League victory, which now marks, we actually found this fascinating, we hadn't realized this, that he has not lost a steeplechase since September of 2021. We're talking about almost 2-year win streak here in the steeple. However, he's also only raced 9 times, but for the steeplechase, that's not uncommon because there's just not as many races, and they're not going to do it as often because it's hard on the body.
I want to see another showdown with Lemecha Germa.
Yeah, I mean, El Bakali clearly wants people to believe that he can beat Girma, but it's going to be tough. After Girma runs 3:29 and a 1500, you know this dude's speed is top notch.
And also, for those of you who haven't been tracking along, Lemecha Germa just achieved the world record in the 3,000 meter steeplechase. So that's why I'm bringing him up against Sufjan El Bakali, who's been on this win streak. Well, we got to see him against Girma again soon.
Right. And so Girma broke the world record. He ran 7:52. Sufjan El Bakali almost broke the world record a couple weeks before that when he ran 7:56. So people are like, holy smokes, these guys are like the fastest they've ever been and need to race each other more. But they haven't in a while. Well, Girma did beat another strong Ethiopian, Gednet Wale, though, in a very dominant last 600 in Sufjan El Bakali style. I think I said Girma. El Bakali beat Wale. And then Gordy Beamish of New Zealand, got to mention him because he's an On Athletics Club member. Shout out. He set a new PR, and he was the only one in the race to run a personal best, which means that guy was defying the circumstances and that weather and everything else for a 4th place finish and a PR time. Well done.
Should we call her Defying D'Amato?
Oh, you're transitioning.
I'm transitioning.
Okay, this is
I'm
a
trying
new
to come
thing.
up with
It's
clever thing. And I've just been so excited to say the name Kira D'Amato as many times as possible during this episode. But
this is going to be a little weird, isn't it?
Kira D'Amato in Australia ran the new American half marathon record.
So you're just going to go right into it.
I'm going to just go right into it.
You're not going to set it up.
I don't know all the details of this race. I mean, I would love to hear from Kira how this race went down. Would all of you?
Don't you have her cell number somewhere?
No, but I might reach out to her.
She said to call her when we're in town and we can like meet up or go to their house or something.
What?
She said that. Okay, anyway, I'm joking. Kira, if you're listening to this, I'm just trying to be silly. I'm not trying to like name drop or something. All right, so here's the point. Kira D'Amato broke the American record last year in the marathon, but only held it for about 6 months because Emily Sisson broke her record later on that year, which is always frustrating because you'd like to hold a record for a little while because, you know, then you're like this record holder. But she didn't get to be the record holder for very long. So she got her revenge
on Emily Sisson.
On Emily Sisson's half marathon record.
Yeah.
Broke it by 13 seconds. Very impressive.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
She won the race in 1:06:39, which is also a North American record, by the way, and Australian all-comers record, which means it is the fastest half marathon run by a woman in Australia.
On Australian soil.
Ever.
Yeah. Right.
On that continent.
Right.
What?
That's saying something.
Yep. And she won the race by over 2 minutes as well.
Very nice.
She's in a league of her own.
She was definitely showing some real class. And this is exciting because Kira's also going to be running in the World Championships in the marathon here in a few weeks. And so you want to see, you know, the U.S. top talent in their top form because they definitely have medal potential. Molly Seidel showed that most recently. And when D'Amato and Sisson are both like all pistons firing, that's a good opportunity for the United States. So we're hopeful.
Yes.
More to come.
Congratulations to Kira D'Amato. Also, I will link to the episode with her just for fun in case you want to listen to that because that was a fun conversation.
Right on.
All right, bonus. Neely Gracie ran the world record mile pushing a stroller.
Did they call it pushing a stroller or did they call it pushing a pram?
Ooh, I should have made sure that I knew the exact title of this world
It doesn't matter.
record.
It's the same thing.
But she ran 5:24 on a track in Colorado.
5:24.
That's really fast.
Pushing a stroller.
And
do they have a minimum weight requirement for the child that's in the stroller?
There probably is a lot of requirements because one of the requirements is that you have to have both of your hand, or sorry, you have to have a hand on it the whole time.
Is it just one or both?
I think it's one, but it said, from what I read in women's running, you can't switch your hands. So if you have one on it, you can't like switch it to the other.
Unless you put both hands on it.
Sure, maybe
and
you
let
can.
go.
Maybe you can do that. I don't know.
I
I don't quite understand. But you do always have to be touching the stroller handle. You can't like push ahead and then run.
Well, it's good
know,
because doing that
safety.
would like totally mess with your rhythm. Andy always does that when she's pushing stroller. She like shoves it and then runs a bit.
Don't tell people that.
and then shoves
like,
it
you're not supposed
and runs
to
a
do
bit.
that.
I don't know what you're talking about. But the point is, I think that's kind of like jarring for your mechanics. But
Okay,
anyway,
that's not the point of this. The point
Guava.
is that Guava is the pram sponsor.
oh, I thought that was the point of it.
That's not the point. No.
Oh.
Okay. The point of it is that Neely Gracie is a really fast runner, and she is doing really well in this season of her life. And to see her do this record is really fun, really cool. Note the previous record was 5:57, so she didn't just break it; she shattered this previous record. And it's just cool that she is doing it, watching her kids be part of the sport, inviting her kids to be part of the sport. In the article, which I'll link to, she says that she grew up, her one of her parents was an Olympian, and so her parents were running every day, and so it's just part of their family culture, and that's how she got into it. Now with her kids, she wants it to be the family culture, to be running together and to involve her kids in the sport as well.
So not inviting them into it, but forcing them.
No.
Forcing them.
Well,
into it.
I guess when you're in a stroller,
I mean,
it's more.
You're
more that
literally
way.
tied into the stroller. You have no choice.
No,
Did she run it in track spikes?
Oh, that's a great question. I bet she did, but I
I'm
don't know
very
that
interested.
for sure. I could look at the picture.
If I were to run with a stroller on a track, would I wear spikes? I don't know. Well, that was fun.
That was fun. Congrats to Neely Gracie on that as well. I think it's fun.
Speaking of fun things, we're done. And so you can finally be free of the sound of our voice is in your ears, which I'm sure you're just ready for us to stop talking. But in case you need more from us, you certainly can share your thoughts and questions anytime by going to AtoZrunning.com/question. And then we'll put them on air and answer your situation and solve all your problems.
That's a big claim, Zach.
Well,
Well, we
want to
do
disappoint.
love your questions, and we do love to investigate and to come up with what would be the best answer for your specific needs. So make sure as you're asking those questions to put some context into your question so we can answer it more thoroughly. And I do want to thank Dot McMahan again for coming on the show today and for all that great wisdom you shared in your story. And also good luck to you at the Olympic Trials Marathon coming up in February.
See you there.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.